Let's blow this up.
Look alive, Bomb Squad. It's time for another bonus episode of Let's Blow This Up. I am your host, Jason Cercone, and today I'm coming to you because it is the 10-year anniversary of yours truly in the podcasting space. So hopefully by now you've gotten used to me being part of this platform. So I decided I wanted to take a few minutes to celebrate and poured myself some Angel's Envy, my favorite bourbon. Honestly, this time of year, it was a big debate. It's nugget nectar season. So those on the East Coast and in the world of where Trogs beer is distributed, you know that nugget nectar comes out every January and it is awesome. It's easily my favorite beer, and it's one of those beers that even to this day, they're celebrating their 21st anniversary this year, and as many years as I can remember back and enjoying that beer, gives you that special feeling inside. It's one of those beers that I look forward to every year. So I was debating on whether to bring that beer to today's podcast or the bourbon, but I figured since we're celebrating, we're going to go with the bourbon. Maybe I'll have the beer later too, but anyway, okay, so I don't want this to be, I mean, with everything, I want this to have some purpose to it. With every podcast I do, I want this to be some, stupid fluff piece. But I had thought about perhaps doing a 10 things I've learned in podcasting in 10 years list. But I started thinking today I was going to sit down and do that list and then record. And then I said, you know what? I've been doing a lot more podcasting in the live setting, really got into the live streaming on season 2 of Let's Blow This Up. And we'll be continuing that on season 3. And even with Podcast Theory, as I did season 4 before retiring that show, it was live. And I like just flying from the cuff and just thinking about some things that come to mind, especially with this, because again, over 10 years, a lot has happened. So I've told the story before, but to put some context to it, 10 years ago today was when me and Jason Collins sat down at Huff's Tap Room, which is a bar, formerly a bar here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to record our very first episode of Over a Couple of Beers. We had absolutely no idea what we were doing. We got some equipment off of Amazon, and maybe 10 years ago, this equipment was top of the line. I doubt it, but it served the purpose. It did what we needed to do. And to piggyback on that story, I've told this before in many settings. My dive into podcasting 10 years ago was really not of traditional means. I jumped into this medium out of spite, which is a really weird reason to start a podcast, right? Like, I don't recommend that to anybody, but in case this is one of the first episodes of mine on any of my podcasts that you've ever heard, I'll tell that story real quick. Long and short of it was, at that time, 10 years ago, I had started a beer blog. I was very big in the craft beer at that time, and still am, just not as much as I used to be as a young 35-year-old man. But I started this blog. I then built a mobile app that was designed to promote events and happenings around Pittsburgh and started to get some traction with that. When the app went live, some guy started trolling me on Twitter. And I never had experienced a troll before, so I interacted with him way too much and ended up finding out just by looking at his profile after a lot of back and forth that he hosted a beer podcast. And it just so happened my friend Jason and I had been kicking around this idea of podcasting would be really cool, right? Like, we should think about doing this. A lot of people are starting to get into podcasting, and we could probably do this too. It would be really neat. But we didn't come up with any concrete ideas on what that podcast could be about. It was just more of like a fleeting moment type of thing. And then when I saw that this guy hosted a beer podcast and he had pissed me off to the level of like, okay, dude, let's go. It's go time. I called Jason up and said, I got our idea. We're going to do a beer podcast and we're going to do it better than that guy. And he said, great, let's do it. Cause he's a big beer guy too. And 2 weeks later, I shit you not, 2 weeks later is when we sat down to do that recording. And again, look back on it and just, I smile, and I still love telling this story 10 years later because it was an absolute shit show. I mean, literally, that was the whole idea was like you talk about planning. This is like the big thing that I lead into at Bombtrack Media when it comes to your podcast. It's all about planning. It's all about having a strategy for how you want to launch your show with excitement and bringing your best content forward to get the ball rolling. But then how are you going to build it over time? What's your long-term strategy? What are you going to do to keep building on this and get your message out there and utilize it in every possible way in that time frame? And also, what are you going to learn along the way? Like all these things that I address on the front end, it was never a thought that crossed my mind when we sat down to do this show. It was like, yeah, this guy sucks. He's making fun of me on Twitter. Let's do a podcast way better than him. Let's not plan it. Let's not really research equipment. Let's just get stuff. And then I talked to some of my partners that I had through the app, and one of them was Huffs. They said, yeah, come on up to the bar and do it here. And I did not realize, I should have because I was advertising their events, that it was trivia night. And honestly, I don't even remember. Maybe it was my own ignorance back then, but maybe I thought that would be really cool. There'd be all this crowd noise, not thinking about listener experience at all. So all this noise is going on while we're drinking beer and trying to have this podcast that had no format. We really, I think, looked at a few headlines that day and said, we'll talk about this. And we were completely untargeted. It wasn't just about beer. It was also about sports. And I'm sure in that first episode, we talked about wrestling because we were wrestling fans. Like it was all over the freaking map. And again, 10 years later, I can sit back, I can have a sip of bourbon, and I can smile because while that may not have gone as smooth as it could have, if we would thought things out, maybe put a little bit more planning into the whole operation, it got me into the medium. It brought me in, and I did some radio in college at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford, the little radio station they have on campus there. That was really where I cut my teeth when it came to radio. Not that I was on the air a ton, but when I did go on, we had a blast doing it. And I had my own little show. It was like a mix of talk and music because we pretty much had freedom to format our show the way we wanted to. But that experience, I lost it when I got out of college. And podcasting, I think when I graduated, it wasn't yet a thing, but it would be a couple of years later, and nothing like what we have now. But it wasn't until around 2011 that I was reintroduced to audio in podcast form. When I was at an event, and a gentleman, good friend of mine named Doug Durda, who had a podcast here in Pittsburgh called Should I Drink That, was at this event, and he's doing this thing. And I just went up to them when they were done and said, what is this? What are you doing? He said, oh, this is a podcast. And I said, no shit, that's really cool. I hadn't heard about podcasts since I bought my first iPod, and that was probably 5 years before that. And if you remember, all my old, I'm absolutely dating all of us. If you have any idea of any of the references that I'm making here, you feel old with me, ladies and gentlemen. But on my iPod, there was this thing that said podcasts. If you have the iPod, you remember this. And then you clicked on it, and there's nothing there. And I said, what the hell's a podcast? Back in the day, in the early stages of podcasting, you would make a radio show and then you would put it on the internet, and then users that want to listen to it, like myself, would have to upload it through iTunes into our iPods. When we sync the music, it would sync our podcasts as well. And I never did that. I had no idea that was what it was. And then until Doug told me what a podcast was, I said, all right. And then fast forward to Jason and I sitting down doing that first episode. So that was 10 years ago today. Crazy how far it's come. But like I said, it brought me into the medium, and I knew this is where I wanted to be. I had so much fun doing that recording, even though it really wasn't that great, and we did no editing, and we really put a big piece of crap out on the internet. It wasn't good, but it was there. People liked it. People listened to it, and we started to grow a little bit of an audience, and we were off to the races. So that podcast went for a while, and then Jason and I our schedules started to conflict, and it the whole Podfade thing, before I even knew what Podfade was, it started to become a thing. And then I took the show over on my own and ran it for a while. And then I ended that and started a new show. And then after doing the new show, which was sort of a spin-off of that first beer podcast, it was beer related, but it was more interview based, and it was more focusing on the industry people, the ones that were making the product, the ones that were making the business move forward. Because craft beer now, I mean, I think I don't follow it as closely as I used to, but I can just see from what people say, it's sort of leveled off. The growth at this time was enormous. There were little breweries popping up all over the place. and Pittsburgh too, where I was located. And we have a tremendous beer scene here in Pittsburgh, and there's still a lot of great breweries that are operating. Unfortunately, there were some due to COVID and other reasons have closed down, and that's the nature of the beast. But overall, the beer scene was really thriving, and I wanted to create a podcast that spoke to that. So bringing industry people on to share insights and talk about what they were doing to make the industry go forward was really a big thing for me, because that not only gave me an opportunity to create great content for others to consume, but it allowed me to learn more about the industry that I was partaking in as well. So that podcast went for a little bit, but then what happened in there, and this is really one of the first things I want to talk about in regards to things I've learned. And that was really my first learning experience in this whole thing. In doing that podcast, I was about 20 episodes deep, and I realized that I loved what I was doing, and I loved the content that we were creating, me and the people I collaborated with. But overall, I knew I needed to get better at my craft. I needed to learn more about what this podcast thing was. I was at that point where I knew I wanted to keep diving deeper, but I wasn't getting the knowledge on the fly. Of course, jumping in the pool and learning how to swim is going to teach you a lot, but I wanted to take a step back, remove myself from the microphone, and really take a minute to learn. And that's a piece of advice that I would give anybody today. I'm not saying you do it for the time period that I did. For me, it was a year and a half. I shut that podcast down and I took a year and a half off, and I just studied, listening to other podcasters, listening to radio personalities and TV personalities, seeing how people communicated with the camera, with the microphone. That was important to me. I wanted to learn how that was done. And I would practice in the mirror, and I would practice with recordings that never went live. I would just give myself an opportunity to build more of a foundation than I had ever given myself before. And again, if I could pass one thing along to him, I'm trying to pass a few things along to you today in regards to knowledge, but that would be one. Not saying you have to take that long, but even in your podcasting journey as it is now, no matter where you're at, take time to listen to what other people are doing in this space. And not just in podcasting, but any media, radio, television. Of course, now with the rise of social media, that really wasn't a big thing 10 years ago when I started. Now, podcasts live in multiple forms, and little short clips are just as consumable as the long form content, and people are killing it in that space. So watch how people are creating that content. Watch how they're utilizing it to their advantage and connecting with people on multiple levels, because that long form content gives you an opportunity to make a connection when someone's in long form mode, but that short form content gives you an opportunity to connect with people when they're in short form mode. And just as well as me, we're all in different modes at different times. So big thing for me was stepping away. And when I jumped back in, I felt much more confident. I felt much more prepared, and I felt the content was moving forward in a powerful way. And me as a podcaster was moving forward in a powerful way as well. I will say this one thing is I forgot I was going to bring this up earlier. I found by accident some old episodes of Over a Couple of Beers. This was back from 2015 and 2016. The only reason I was going to, they're all off the internet. I took them all down, but I was going to start sharing some clips and just bringing some things from the old days back into existence. The only reason I haven't done that yet is because I'm still searching for episode 1. I would love to go back and listen to episode 1 just to see how far it's all come, but I have not found that yet. But I've got a folder of the old podcast. I'm going to try to find a way to put together like a highlight reel, because it's all audio. There's no video to it. And I'll roll that out so you can see how far things have come from a production standpoint, from just an overall delivery standpoint. There's so much growth. I'm happy to say that at least sticking to it has allowed me to grow a little bit on the microphone and on the camera. So nevertheless, moving forward, I think after getting back into that space, I knew that podcasting for me was going to be a big part of my life. And because of COVID, I moved in this direction full time a lot sooner than I thought I would, because I had gone into 2020. I just turned 40, and I turned 40. My birthday's at the end of each year, December 29th. So I always use the end of the year to reflect and think about things that have happened and how are things going? Where are they going to go? What's the future look like? And for me, I was starting to feel that urge of like, it might be time for a change. I love the little business I've built in the beer industry. By then I was working directly with some breweries and helping them with sales and marketing and getting their products placed, and really had built some great relationships. And many of those relationships still stand to this day. It was a great time, and these breweries were doing some amazing things and still are to this day. But COVID blew things up a lot quicker than I thought, because I was thinking it might be time to think about a change. However, the business was growing, so maybe don't rock the boat. But COVID changed some things up for me. So that's when I went full time into podcasting. And that's really, I feel, over the last 4 years, 4 years and change now, that's where things really started to come together. And I absolutely 100% immersed myself in this medium, which I highly recommend anybody do, because whether you're using podcasting for your business, whether you're doing it as a hobby, there's so many gains that are right there for the taking if you use podcasting right. And I know a lot of folks, maybe even you watching or listening to this podcast today, have that monetization front of mind. And I totally, absolutely get it. Anything that we put out there, we want to monetize it. And believe me, there are ways to do it. And I'm not going to get into all that today. Listen to other episodes of Let's Blow This Up, because you'll hear all about those types of strategies. But I want to impart the knowledge and wisdom of 10 years in podcasting today to say that there's more. Monetization is huge. Of course, you're going to try to find a way to make that happen. I did. So many people have. But in doing that, don't discount all of the other benefits that come from your podcasting experience. Don't ever discount the relationships that you're going to build just by collaborating with other podcasters, or maybe going to a big conference like Podcast Movement or Podfest and getting to meet these podcasters in person and breaking bread or sharing a glass, or glass of beer, glass of wine, glass of whiskey, whatever you drink, or even a cup of coffee. So much can be gained, and these relationships often start because you heard my voice on a podcast and said, wow, I'd like to have him on my show. Or I heard your voice on a podcast and I want to bring you on mine. And we collaborate and we create content that stimulates the audience. That's the idea. But in the moment, as we create that content, we're forging a relationship. That's step one. That's life. That's what this is all about. You start building powerful, positive, meaningful relationships in your world. Watch how things start to escalate in a major way. That's something that podcasting brought to me, because some of the friends that I have, I know I never would have even had an opportunity to meet them if we didn't share a microphone and create a podcast together, whether it was my show or me being a guest on theirs. So monetization, of course, is going to be huge, but the relationships that you get from podcasting, they cannot be duplicated, because you're coming together for a common goal. And when you work together with that synergy and that chemistry and you make something special, it's only going to lead to more opportunities with that person. Or they may say, this was great. I've got a few people I want to introduce you to, because you could be a rock star on their show. Or you're offering a product that I know 2 or 3 people that they absolutely need it. Let me connect you and take it from there. There's so much power in the relationships. And that, to me, I've said it a lot of times. Podcasting is the most powerful digital networking platform we have at our disposal. I firmly believe that. I've leaned into that heavily in 2025 to kick things off. I'm going to be doing even more with this, because I want to put together a couple presentations and some content based around this. You'll see some of that in season 3 of Let's Blow This Up. But podcasting, to me, offers so much more than just a monetization angle, that if you have any inkling of putting content on the internet, podcasting is a great way to build that content. It creates a solid foundation, and the content you create is incredibly versatile. A big pillar of what I lean into at Bombtrack Media is the versatility of podcast content, because as a business, you're not just looking to create a podcast. You're looking to make connections that lead to relationships, that lead to business, that lead to business growth. So you're looking for that video content that's going to strike somebody when they're on YouTube, or those short form reels when they're on Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube Shorts. That podcast element is perfect for the person that you want to connect with while they're on the go, or they're at the gym, or they're in the car, on a bus, on a walk. Using this content can be so powerful if you leverage it the right way. And that's not even to mention the written component that can be pulled from the transcripts, building blog posts and show notes. And this is all based on your words. It's all based on what you're creating. It's not like just going to Chat GPT and putting in a generic prompt about your industry and then getting back some generic fluff. This is your words, your knowledge, your expertise, all focused into one central area that helps impact your audience in a number of ways. So one of the big things that I will say about podcast content, no matter what you want to achieve, if you're looking to build your brand, if you're looking to establish yourself as an authority, podcasting is a great way to make all of this content come together. And we're living in a digital world where there is so much content coming out that you're going to get lost if you don't do it, because somebody else in your space is going to do it. But you also have to look at positioning it. And the one thing I'll say, because when I say that comment, you might say, well, there you go. Everybody in my industry is already talking about this. Maybe, but they're not talking about it like you're going to talk about it. No matter what your content model is, and no matter what your area of expertise is, if you haven't put your spin on it and put it out into the world, nobody's heard it yet. Keep that in mind if you've been thinking about podcasting and saying, I don't know if this is going to work for me. It seems like there's too many podcasts out there, too many podcasts in my particular niche. There's not. Think about a busy street like here in Pittsburgh. I'll think of McKnight Road. It's the one road that everybody hates to travel, but there's tons of businesses, right? And there's how many pizza places and fast food restaurants all within one little block of one another. It's because everybody wants something a little different. If they stopped at McDonald's today for lunch, maybe tomorrow they don't want McDonald's. Maybe they want Chipotle. Maybe they want Taco Bell. Everybody's always looking for a different spin. And you never know when the right person that's listening to your content clicks that play button and automatically is like, whoa, I am into this. This is exactly what I was looking for. So I say with podcasting, again, it didn't take me 10 years to learn this, but I will say in 10 years, I have absolutely built an appreciation for it. Podcasting can cover so much of the groundwork that you need for your business, and it checks off so many boxes. So leading into it for a business, make sure you understand that, again, the monetization's there, the relationship building's there. But from a pure content perspective, you can't overlook podcasting, because if you do it right, it's going to deliver everything that you need. I will say a couple basic ones that I know I've talked about in the past, because I don't want to go all day with this because, well, for one, I need a sip of bourbon. Excuse me. Angel's Envy is so good. Listener experience is everything. You want to make sure that you create content that's going to consume your audience to a point where they put their ass in the seat and they don't move until the very end. And then not only do they come back for the next episode, not only do they go back in the archives and discover what else they've missed, they go out and start telling others they need to listen as well. Your audience can grow exponentially if you create content that makes them stand up and go tell a friend and say, this was awesome. You need to listen to it. This is how media grows. This is how television shows and movies and all of these forms of entertainment have grown over the years, because one person hears it. And when you love something, you want everybody that you're connected to love it as well. So you can talk about it. So you can share that together. Oh my God, you're going to love this movie. You're going to love this TV show, or that show sucked. Don't watch that. And then sometimes I that's the side of it I don't necessarily agree with, because you may hate something that I would absolutely love, but you know how we're wired. And those are the types of conversations that we have. So with podcasting, you want to create something to where a person stands up and goes and tells everyone in their circle they need to listen as well. And then when they do, all of a sudden you're starting to experience exponential growth. A great point that I'm going to bring up from season 2 of Let's Blow This Up. My friend Alex Sanfilippo joined me, and Alex made the point about The Office. Great show, one of my favorites. It's one of Alex's favorites. And he said, no episode of The Office ever ended with Michael Scott standing up and saying, hey, if you like today's episode, go out and share it. We're so prone as fans to share that content, whether it's through our digital platforms, whether it's through word of mouth, whether it's through texting, that we don't need the actors and the personalities on that show to tell us to do it. We're just doing it because we know the people in our circle are going to enjoy it as well. Think of all the content that you share on your social platforms that come from others. This is where the world's headed, and this is why companies that have started to grab hold of that user-generated content, realizing that these personalities are going to push their brand forward way better than they can by spending millions of dollars on huge advertising campaigns. You're seeing those brands start to stand out, and that's the type of content we consume. You're in a great position as a podcaster to make that type of content come to life. That's one big thing that I have learned to love over the years with this medium. And I will say that, again, thinking about the listener experience, I think back on many episodes that I've done, more back in the beer space, because I think we got a little bit of a pass because we were a beer podcast. So some of those episodes, we were a little tuned in. And one of them that stands out that I'll never forget was at what was called the Goodwood Festival here in Pittsburgh. We did a live recording, not live, it was more live in that we were there, and the people that were there that were part of the event would come and join us. And we had so many people talking, and there's 2 or 3 different conversations happening at once. And I had drank way too much before we went live. And it was, again, in the moment when we were recording it, a blast. I got home the next day and I rolled out of bed, hungover, trying to edit the thing, and just said, "Oh my God, what have we done?" And I still put it out because I didn't know then. I think now I look back on that, I probably would have said this is not for public consumption, because no one could have enjoyed that the way that we did. We were in the moment. We were together. That was the camaraderie, and that's where those events really pop. But trying to listen to that back on a podcast with 3 different conversations happening at the same time, not going to have a good time as a listener. So I definitely took some big lessons from that. So listener experience is everything. I will say, like when Jason and I first kicked off over a couple of beers 10 years ago today, no real strategy. Spite is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Make sure you're thinking about these things. Make sure that you've put together a plan that allows you to launch with strength. You don't want to just throw out one episode to see if the world shows up, because I'm going to tell you now, they won't. You haven't proven yourself yet. You have to show the world that you are in this for the long haul, and you're going to consistently bring them a valuable product. And the more you build on that, the more the people will come. It takes time. Believe me, this isn't one of those fast results types of things. And there are methods that you can take to grow faster. Absolutely. But a question I often ask podcasters, especially ones that are so upset with their numbers, is if you woke up tomorrow and looked at your numbers and 1 million people had listened, what would change? And there's typically not an answer to that question, because I don't think people know what that would lead to. I think they just have this idea in their head that I need to have massive numbers because that's what everybody else is saying they have. But the big podcasts out there, for the most part, I mean, maybe to a degree, like maybe Joe Rogan, because you see the numbers on YouTube. But I think from a podcaster's perspective, I've never heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you've heard this, please, if you've heard this, let me know, because I would like to know. I've never heard a podcaster get on their show and say, "Well, we had this many downloads last week. Let's see if we can top that." That's not why you're creating this content. Downloads are important in the right context, but it's not just for the sake of getting downloads. That's just vanity. You have to have a strategy in mind for what you want to accomplish. And I guarantee no podcast strategy has ever started with, "I'm just doing this for downloads." Downloads can help with getting advertising deals and sponsorship deals, sure, but the content comes first. You have to have strong content that makes people want to listen. And that's going to continue to snowball and grow exponentially over time. And the more effort you put into creating great content, the more all of those other pieces are going to fall into place. But if you think you can just roll something out there and get massive downloads just because, I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you. And I will say, there was a podcast that I did along the way in my 10-year journey where I know download numbers deterred me. And I look back and I'm like, that was the dumbest reason to quit doing that podcast ever. And again, looking back on it, I probably could have done a couple other things different in the prep phase, but I do remember looking at download numbers feeling like it wasn't worth it. And I look back and I say, that was stupid. There was so much more work to be done. And I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I looked at my own naivete and taught myself a valuable lesson. That does not matter. That is not why you sat down to create this content. There is so much more that could have been accomplished from a networking standpoint, from a content standpoint, but I got obsessed with the wrong thing. And that's why I feel so strongly about download numbers now. Yes, they play a role, but for me, it's all about content first, and it should be for you as well. Creating good content is going to tell the story of your longevity in this space. So keep all of that in mind. And again, I feel like I could go on for at least another hour, but I'm going to spare you that and say that it's been a hell of a ride for 10 years. And I'm going to tell this story to wrap things up because you may, I don't know, if you're one of the people with a great memory listening or watching this show, you might remember last year, it was my 9th year. And I don't know what happened to my math skills, but I somehow absolutely thought last year was my 10th year. And I shot this video in my car of some things that I learned in podcasting. And I put that video out. And then I went and looked at the math and said, wait, what the hell am I doing? This has only been 9 years. That really took the edge off things. So I know I took that video down everywhere. I think I left it on LinkedIn. Either way, I was off by a year. And again, I was like, dumbass. So I know for a fact 2015 was where it all began. So 2025, carry the 2. It's been 10 years. And now this is legit. And like I said, I feel like I could keep going with just talking about what I've experienced in this space, but I'll spare you that. I will say, get yourself ready for season 3 of Let's Blow This Up, because this is going to be some great podcast content coming your way. 3 different formats. I'm so pumped to roll that out. I am going to do a live stream preview episode. I will get that on the calendar so you can make sure you're subscribed and following and all that good stuff so you don't miss me there. But February 25th, Tuesday, February 25th, that's where season 3 is going to kick off. 3 episodes a week, and I am looking forward to bringing it your way. I'm also working on another podcast that it's going to be good. I'm pumped for it. Me and my friend Jay Franzi are going to co-host that show together. We haven't, honestly, Jay, if you're listening, we haven't talked about this recently. We got to get on the phone and figure this out because we want to get this out there before somebody else does. Not saying they would, but I think they might. But anyway, it's been a hell of a ride for 10 years. If you've been with me for that time frame, thank you. It's been awesome connecting with you and sharing content with you, creating content for you. If you're just finding me, welcome to the party. We have bourbon. So I'm going to sign off on this 10-year anniversary episode. Like I said, could keep going, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to finish off my bourbon. Then I think I'm going to pour a nugget nectar. I'm going to bring it all full circle here. So again, thank you for being here for this episode, this bonus episode of Let's Blow This Up. Thank you for being a part of this podcasting journey. If you've been here listening, or if you're one of the great friends or colleagues or clients that have gained because of podcasting, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this ride. And I look forward to what comes next. So on that note, cheers to 10 years. Cheers to 10 more. And until our paths cross again, this is Jason Cercone on the special episode of Let's Blow This Up, reminding you to always be explosive.